The silence in the dining room was not the comfortable quiet of a family enjoying a meal. It was a thick, oppressive blanket, woven with unspoken words and veiled glances. Eleanor sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, her eyes scanning the faces around her. Her daughter, Sophia, picked at her roast beef, meticulously cutting it into tiny, unappetizing squares. Sophia's husband, Owen, sat opposite, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond Eleanor's shoulder, a faint, unsettling smirk playing on his lips. The aroma of rosemary and garlic, usually a comforting scent, felt cloying, almost suffocating. Eleanor, typically a woman who savored every meal, found her own plate untouched, the rich brown gravy congealing around the potatoes. A shiver, unrelated to the cool evening air, traced a path down her spine. Something was profoundly wrong. She could feel it in the tightening knot in her stomach, in the shallow rhythm of her breathing. Owen finally broke the strained silence, a calculated cough that seemed to echo disproportionately in the room. He dabbed at his lips with a linen napkin, a theatrical gesture that grated on Eleanor's nerves. "Well," he began, his voice unnaturally calm, "now that we've finished dinner, there's something rather important we need to discuss with you, Eleanor." His eyes, cold and sharp, finally met hers, but there was no warmth, no familial affection in their depth. It was the look of a predator assessing its prey. Sophia kept her head down, but Eleanor saw the subtle clench of her jaw, the way her knuckles whitened as she gripped her fork. Eleanor's heart began to thrum a nervous rhythm against her ribs. Sophia finally looked up, her expression a mask of manufactured concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice, when it came, was devoid of its usual lilt, flat and unyielding. "Mom," she started, her gaze unwavering. "Since Dad passed away, things need to change." The words hung in the air, heavy and loaded, each one a stone dropping into a still pond. Eleanor felt a sudden coldness seep into her bones. Arthur had only been gone a year, and the ache of his absence was still a raw wound. To hear his passing invoked as a justification for some unspecified change sent a jolt of alarm through her. Owen leaned forward slightly, taking over the narrative with a smoothness that suggested this had been rehearsed. "Eleanor," he said, using her full name, a formality that always preceded serious, often unwelcome pronouncements. "We've been observing you closely. You're getting older, and frankly, we're concerned. It's simply too much for one person. This house, for instance," he gestured vaguely around the elegant dining room, a house Eleanor and Arthur had built from the ground up. "It requires constant upkeep. And then there's the Malibu beach house, not to mention the company Arthur built." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "It's a tremendous responsibility, Eleanor. One that's clearly becoming too much for you to manage alone." The implication was clear, cutting like a finely honed blade. Eleanor's heart hammered a frantic drumbeat in her chest. Manage? These weren't mere properties or businesses. They were the tangible manifestations of a lifetime of shared dreams, hard work, and love. This grand house filled with memories of laughter and quiet evenings. The beach house where they'd celebrated countless anniversaries, the salty air a balm to their souls. The company, Arthur's passion, yes, but also a venture she had supported, strategized for, and poured her own energy into for decades. This was their legacy, hers and Arthur's, a testament to their partnership. The thought of losing any part of it, especially to the calculated maneuvering of her own daughter and son-in-law, was a physical blow. Sophia chimed in, her voice edged with a chilling blend of condescension and what she likely believed was concern. "Mom, you've forgotten Bill's lately. And that time you got lost driving back from Dr. Miller's office? You were disoriented for hours." The accusations, delivered with such cold contempt, were a cruel fabrication. Eleanor remembered the lost incident vividly. It had been a detour due to unexpected road construction, nothing more. And the bills? She was meticulous, perhaps more so now than ever, a way to maintain control in a world that felt increasingly chaotic without Arthur. She met Sophia's gaze, a silent denial in her eyes, but Sophia simply looked away, satisfied with the damage she had inflicted. Owen, seeing his wife's evidence had landed, seized the moment. He straightened in his chair, his tone hardening, leaving no room for argument. Eleanor, he stated, his voice resonating with an almost judicial finality, the truth is, you're simply not capable of managing these responsibilities anymore. It's for your own good, for your safety, for the preservation of the family assets. The words were like a gavel striking, a verdict delivered without trial, without defense. Then came the crushing blow delivered with casual brutality. So, Sophia continued, picking up where Owen left off, we've made arrangements. We think it's best if you move to Sunset Manor. It's a wonderful facility, Mom. Beautiful grounds, excellent care. You'll be safe there, well looked after. Sunset Manor, the name itself conjured images of sterile corridors, forced activities, and the slow, quiet diminishment of life. Eleanor had visited friends there, always leaving with a profound sense of sadness, vowing she would never end up in such a place. It was a prison sentence, subtly disguised as an act of kindness. Sophia leaned across the table, her carefully constructed facade of concern crumbling, to reveal the naked avarice beneath. Her voice dropped, a harsh whisper that cut through the silence. Since Dad passed away, Mom, everything naturally falls to me. The beach house, the company. It's only logical. You cry, pack your bags, and go to the nursing home. The sheer audacity, the callous disregard for Eleanor's feelings, for her very existence outside of their plans, was breathtaking. It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered with the cold authority of a dictator. Owen's smirk, which had briefly vanished, returned, broader and more contemptuous than before. He crossed his arms, leaning back, as if admiring a masterpiece of manipulation. And let's be honest, Eleanor, he drawled, his voice dripping with condescension. You never really owned anything anyway. Arthur's name was on all the paperwork. Everything was in his name. You were just his wife. The insult was twofold. Not only were they stripping her of her home and legacy, but they were also erasing her identity, reducing her decades of partnership and contribution to a mere footnote. She was not a co-owner, not a partner, just a convenient placeholder. A burning sensation pricked behind Eleanor's eyes. A wave of grief, outrage, and betrayal threatened to overwhelm her. The words were a physical assault designed to shatter her spirit. She felt the tears welling, hot and stinging, but she would not let them fall. Not now, not in front of them. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. She pressed her lips into a thin line, summoning every ounce of the strength that Arthur had always admired in her. Her chin lifted imperceptibly. Sophia, oblivious to the quiet defiance radiating from her mother, continued, The arrangements are all made. The movers will be here next Tuesday. We've already started sorting through things, deciding what's suitable for Sunset Manor. Next week, they intended to dismantle her life, erase her presence, and redefine her existence within a mere 7 days. The efficiency of their cruelty was chilling. It was as if they couldn't wait to be rid of her, to claim what they believed was theirs. Eleanor finally moved. Her hand, steady despite the earthquake rumbling within her, reached down beside her chair. With a deliberate slowness that commanded attention, she retrieved a thick manila envelope that had been resting on the floor, hidden from their view. The slight crinkle of the heavy paper broke the silence, a small sound that nonetheless seemed to reverberate through the opulent dining room. Sophia, mid-sentence, froze, her mouth slightly agape. Owen's smirk vanished, his eyes narrowing, suddenly wary. Their casual dismissal turned into an uneasy stillness. Eleanor looked at them, a slow, grim smile spreading across her lips. It wasn't a smile of amusement or joy, but one of profound, resolute purpose. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, almost dangerously so, a stark contrast to the storm raging in her heart. This, she began, holding up the envelope, is something your father, Arthur, left for me. She paused, letting her words sink in, watching their expressions shift from bewilderment to a dawning comprehension. He told me to open it only if I was ever treated poorly by my own family. The color drained from Sophia's face, leaving it a sickly pale. Her eyes, moments before filled with contempt, widened with sudden, chilling apprehension. Owen, who had been so confident, so smug, felt his carefully constructed composure shatter. His smirk, which had been so firmly in place, dissolved entirely, replaced by a look of stark, unadulterated fear. A cold dread, far more potent than any she had felt that evening, began to seep into their very bones. They had anticipated tears, pleading, perhaps even a furious outburst. They had not anticipated a countermove, especially one orchestrated by the very man they believed had left Eleanor powerless. As Eleanor held the manila envelope, her gaze unwavering as she watched the fear bloom on Sophia and Owen's faces, her mind drifted back, years before, to a quiet afternoon, roughly 3 months before Arthur's sudden passing. They had been sitting in his study, the rich scent of leather and old books filling the air, a favorite spot for their deeper conversations. Arthur, usually a man of jovial disposition, had been uncharacteristically somber. He had set down his half-finished crossword puzzle, the pen lying idle on the page. "Eleanor," he'd begun, his voice low and serious, "I need to tell you something about Owen." Eleanor had looked up from her book, a slight frown creasing her brow. She hadn't seen much of Owen's calculating side then. He had always seemed charming enough, if a little overly ambitious. Arthur had continued, a deep furrow in his brow. He described how he had been observing Owen closely, noting his subtle yet persistent inquiries about their financial affairs, about the intricacies of the company's operations, and about the structure of their assets. "It's not just general interest, my dear," Arthur had explained, his eyes troubled. "It's a specific, almost dissecting interest. He asks about the value of the Malibu property, the liquidity of the various investment accounts, even the specifics of the company's real estate holdings. He always manages to bring it up in casual conversation, but it feels anything but casual." Eleanor, at the time, had tried to reassure him, a gentle hand on his arm. "Oh, Arthur, you're just being an old worrywart. He's probably just curious about how we built everything up. Maybe he's looking for business advice or trying to learn from your success. He wants to impress you." She'd smiled, attempting to lighten the mood, convinced that Arthur, in his loving, protective way, was simply overthinking things, perhaps even a little jealous of his daughter's husband. She wanted to believe the best in her son-in-law, for Sophia's sake. But Arthur had shaken his head slowly, his gaze distant, as if seeing something far off and troubling. "No, Eleanor," he insisted, his voice firm, leaving no room for her comforting reassurances. "It's not natural curiosity, it's calculation. There's a gleam in his eye when he talks about our assets, a way he measures my responses. He's planning something. I can feel it." He had then gone on to explain that his instincts about people, honed over decades in business, were rarely wrong. He had seen similar glimmers of avarice in would-be business partners and competitors. He had never expected to see it in a man who married his daughter. Now, sitting across from Sophia and Owen, their faces etched with a fear that Eleanor recognized as guilt, she realized with a sickening lurch in her stomach that Arthur had been right all along. Every word he had uttered, every subtle warning, had been a prophecy, the knot of dread that had been forming in her stomach for the past year, ever since Arthur's passing, finally tightened into a cold, hard certainty. "Arthur," Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength, pulling herself back from the painful memory. "He didn't just feel things. He was a man of meticulous detail, as you both well know." Her eyes swept over Owen, then Sophia. "He started documenting these little things. He called it keeping notes on the future. He wrote down conversations he overheard, specific questions Owen would ask about our assets, about my role in the company after he was gone. He even noted the most peculiar detail." Sophia, her voice a reedy whisper, finally managed to speak. What are you talking about, Mom?" Her eyes darted from the envelope in Eleanor's hand to her mother's unwavering gaze, then back to Owen, searching for answers, or perhaps an escape. Eleanor smiled, a cold, almost predatory expression that mirrored Arthur's own determination. He noted the way certain family photos mysteriously disappeared from Sophia's house after she got married. Sophia blinked, genuine confusion warring with her fear. "What photos? Mom, what are you talking about?" Eleanor didn't miss a beat. "The ones from your childhood, Sophia, specifically the ones of you and me together, particularly those taken in this house or at the beach house. The ones where we were laughing, where there was genuine warmth between us." She paused, letting the implications sink in. He noted how Owen would subtly or not so subtly suggest they made the house cluttered, or that they didn't fit the aesthetic. And then, one by one, they vanished. He had a theory about why. Owen, finding his voice, scoffed, attempting to regain some semblance of control. This is ridiculous. Arthur was an old man, Eleanor. He was paranoid in his later years. Losing his mind, perhaps. He waved a dismissive hand, attempting to relegate Arthur's observations to the ramblings of an ailing mind. Eleanor's smile didn't falter, but her eyes hardened. Arthur's mind, Owen, was as sharp as a tack until the very end. Sharper, perhaps, than you ever gave him credit for. And he was certainly sharper than you assumed. She opened the manila envelope, pulling out a thick sheaf of papers bound together. They were handwritten in Arthur's familiar, elegant script, dated and meticulously detailed. He noted your inquiries, Owen, Eleanor continued, her voice steady, about his life insurance policies. The precise amounts, the beneficiaries. He recorded your casual suggestions for a general power of attorney, urging him to put all his affairs in order. For my own protection, should anything happen. He wrote down your repeated comments, always delivered with a saw and a shake of your head, about the incredible expense of elderly parents and how it drains family resources. She looked at Owen, her eyes burning with a silent accusation. He observed all of it. Then Eleanor turned her gaze to Sophia, her voice softening slightly, tinged with a deep sadness. And he noted other things, Sophia. He documented how your calls to us became less frequent, how the weekly Sunday dinners, a tradition we cherished, became rare events, often canceled at the last minute. Her voice cracked just slightly, a momentary glimpse of the pain that had festered in her heart. And when you did call, or when we tried to make plans, Owen would often interrupt, or there would be a sudden scheduling conflict that couldn't be avoided. He even kept a log of how many times you declined an invitation or canceled an arrangement, always with an excuse that, on its own, seemed perfectly plausible. Eleanor took a deep breath, the confession feeling heavy on her tongue. I myself tried to make excuses for you, Sophia. I convinced myself you were just busy, building your own life, wrapped up in your new marriage, pursuing your career. I wanted so desperately to believe that my daughter wasn't drifting away from me, that she hadn't changed. A tear finally escaped, tracing a path down her cheek, but it was not a tear of weakness, but of bitter recognition. But Arthur, he saw it for what it was, a pattern, a calculated pattern of isolation, designed to slowly, methodically, separate me from my support system, from my own daughter, until I was truly alone. She met Sophia's gaze, her eyes brimming with a profound sorrow mixed with an unwavering resolve. He saw it all, and he documented every single detail. And the papers rustled softly in her hand, a testament to Arthur's enduring love and foresight, and a chilling indictment of their betrayal. Eleanor, her voice steady and resolute, continued to peel back the layers of deceit. Arthur's meticulous notes didn't stop at your attempts to isolate me, Sophia, or at Owen's persistent inquiries about our wealth. She shifted the bound papers in her hand, the rustling a soft counterpoint to the growing tension in the room. He also started to notice a very specific pattern in your financial behavior, Owen. She paused, letting her gaze rest pointedly on her son-in-law. He noted, Eleanor elaborated, her voice devoid of emotion, how you'd suddenly develop expensive new hobbies, Owen. The vintage car restoration that cost a fortune. The membership to that exclusive golf club right after our company had particularly good quarters. The extravagant trips that Sophia would post about, always coinciding with a significant influx of capital into our family business. She watched as Owen's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping nervously in his cheek. He had clearly believed these indulgences were unnoticed, hidden behind the facade of his successful advertising firm. Owen, finding his voice again, albeit with a slight tremor, attempted to bluster. I work hard, Eleanor. My firm is successful. I'm entitled to enjoy the fruits of my labor. His eyes darted nervously between Eleanor and Sophia, seeking some form of tacit support. Eleanor merely arched an eyebrow, a gesture Arthur himself had perfected when someone was attempting to spin an untruth. Successful, Owen? That's interesting because Arthur's notes tell a very different story. She looked down at the papers, her finger tracing a line of neat script. According to our information, your advertising firm, Strategic Visions Marketing, has been operating at a significant loss for the past 2 consecutive years. Not just breaking even, Owen, but hemorrhaging money. The color drained from Owen's face, leaving him ashen. Sophia, too, looked utterly bewildered, her eyes wide with shock. Eleanor wasn't finished. Furthermore, your mortgage payments on that impressive Beverly Hills property you flaunt, they are 3 months behind. And your credit cards, Owen? They are maxed out, showing balances well into 6 figures. The revelation hung in the air, a devastating blow. Sophia gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes darting between her husband and her mother, a silent question forming on her lips. Owen, for once, was speechless, his face a mask of disbelief and rapidly escalating panic. He stared at Eleanor, his bravado completely evaporated. "How?" Sophia finally managed to whisper, her voice trembling. "How do you know that, Mom? How could you possibly know about Owen's private finances?" Owen, finding his voice again, roared, "That's an invasion of privacy. How dare you? Who told you this? Where did you get that information?" His face was contorted with a mixture of rage and fear. Eleanor remained calm, her composure unshakable. She met Owen's furious gaze without flinching. "Because Arthur," she stated, her voice even and clear, "hired a private investigator. 6 months before he died." The words dropped into the tense silence like stones, creating ripples of shock. "He told me that if his instincts about you, Owen, were correct, and if I was ever to find myself in a vulnerable position, or if you and Sophia ever tried to undermine me, this information would be vital." She gestured to the envelope in her hand. "This isn't just Arthur's personal notes, though those are damning enough. This envelope contains photocopies, legally obtained photocopies of your credit reports, Owen, your bank statements, business filings for Strategic Visions Marketing, all accessed through entirely legal means by a reputable licensed private investigator." Eleanor turned her gaze to Sophia, her voice softening slightly, a hint of sorrow mingling with her resolve. "Sophia, Owen has been in deep financial trouble for a very long time. Not just recently, these reports show he's been deeply in debt since before your marriage. They go back 5 years, tracing a consistent pattern of excessive spending far beyond his income and a desperate reliance on credit." Sophia's face crumpled. The illusion of her husband's success, the narrative she had so carefully constructed around their life, was shattering before her eyes. "And it gets worse, Sophia," Eleanor continued, her voice heavy with the weight of revelation. "The investigator also found records of Owen's activities before you two even met. He conducted extensive research into our family's net worth, our various assets, the value of the company, even before your first date." Eleanor watched Sophia's eyes widen as the realization dawned on her. "He even visited our company's corporate office 6 months before he supposedly chanced upon you at that charity gala. He claimed he was interested in a non-existent construction project, trying to gather information, to gain access." The dawning understanding on Sophia's face was painful to witness. Her romantic chance meeting, the whirlwind courtship, the careful cultivation of their relationship, it was all unraveling, exposed as a cold, calculated campaign of manipulation. The man she had loved, the man she had built a life with, was a complete stranger, a schemer who had targeted her family for their wealth. The betrayal for Sophia was not just against Eleanor, but against her own heart. Eleanor closed the envelope, its contents now laid bare, its purpose undeniably clear. She met their stunned, terrified gazes. "Arthur," she reiterated, her voice firm, "left very specific instructions for me regarding this envelope. If I was ever mistreated, if I was ever made to feel as though my home, my legacy, or my dignity was being threatened by my own family, I was to open this envelope. And then I was to follow the plan." Owen, shaking off his stupor, lunged forward slightly in his chair, his face contorted with desperation and fury. "What plan?" he demanded, his voice a guttural snarl. "What twisted plan did that paranoid old man cook up?" Eleanor merely smiled, a slow, triumphant smile that had held no warmth, only fierce determination. She had lost her husband, and for a time she had nearly lost herself. But Arthur, in his wisdom and his boundless love, had given her a weapon. She held their gazes, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "The plan, Owen," she declared, her eyes sparkling with a renewed fire, "that ensures I'll never end up in Sunset Manor, and that the people who truly deserve our family's legacy are the ones who get it." With a deliberate slowness that heightened the unbearable tension in the room, Eleanor carefully broke the crimson wax seal on the largest, thickest document within the manila envelope. The faint crackle of the seal breaking felt momentous, like the tearing of a veil. She could feel the tangible weight of the truth within her hands, the culmination of Arthur's foresight in love. Arthur spent the last 6 months of his life preparing for this very moment, Eleanor declared, her voice resonating with an almost sacred solemnity. He called it his insurance policy against vultures. Her gaze flickered to Owen, then briefly, regretfully, to Sophia, who now looked utterly lost, her betrayal compounded by a dawning terror. Eleanor pulled out a single aged sheet of paper, folded precisely in half. It was Arthur's familiar stationery, and his elegant handwriting filled the page. The date at the top, a chilling detail, indicated it had been written just 2 weeks before his sudden heart attack. She began to read, her voice clear and steady, lending an almost spectral presence to Arthur's words in the silent dining room. "My dearest Eleanor," she began, the words echoing with Arthur's profound affection. "If you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Someone has tried to separate you from the life we built together, and I suspect I know who that someone is. This letter and the documents within this envelope are my final act of love and protection for you. Do not falter. Do not despair. You are stronger than you know." Eleanor's voice wavered for a split second, a catch in her throat, but she quickly regained her composure. She continued, reading from Arthur's letter. "I have observed Owen's methods. He is a master of psychological manipulation, subtle at first, then increasingly overt. He has systematically sought to isolate you, my darling. He has, I believe, used Sophia as an unwitting pawn in his game. He has undermined your confidence, questioned your memory, and subtly painted me as a controlling figure in our marriage, all to drive a wedge between us and, more importantly, between you and Sophia." As Eleanor read Arthur's prophetic words, Sophia's hands resting on the tablecloth began to tremble uncontrollably. The carefully constructed narrative of her marriage, the excuses she had made for Owen's behavior, the subtle shifts in her relationship with her parents, it was all being laid bare, exposed as a deliberate, cruel strategy. Owen, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and panic, abruptly pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly across the polished wood floor. "This is insane," he bellowed, his voice cracking with desperation. "Arthur was paranoid. He was obsessed. This is nothing but the delusional ramblings of an old man trying to control us from the grave." He took a step towards Eleanor, his fists clenched. Eleanor did not flinch. Her gaze, firm and unwavering, met his. "Sit down, Owen," she commanded, her voice low but carrying an undeniable authority that stunned him into submission. The raw power in her tone, a power born of years of quiet observation and now righteous anger, made him hesitate, then slowly, reluctantly, sink back into his chair. He looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting frantically. Eleanor then set Arthur's letter aside, turning to a much thicker folder she had also retrieved from the envelope. This folder was filled with printed sheets, densely packed with text. "Arthur's foresight," she explained, holding up the folder, "extended beyond simple observation. He engaged a digital forensics expert. This expert, working under the strictest confidentiality, legally recovered data from Sophia's old devices. Her previous phone, her laptop from before your marriage, Sophia. Devices you thought were wiped clean, discarded, or simply forgotten." Sophia's breath hitched. She remembered those old devices, discarded after upgrades, believed to be securely wiped. The thought that her intimate digital history might have been compromised, not by a stranger, but by her own father, was a shock quickly overshadowed by the dread of what might be uncovered. Eleanor selected a few sheets from the folder. "Let's start with a rather illuminating text exchange," she said, her voice dry. "This is between Owen and a contact named Liam, dated approximately 3 years ago, before your engagement, Sophia. Eleanor began to read, her voice clear. Owen, timeline accelerating. Arthur starting to question things. Need to lock this down ASAP. Oh, Liam, any new intel on the target's net worth? Owen, still solid, 8 million in liquid assets plus the 2 houses. Business income averaging 2 million annually. And the old man's heart isn't what it used to be. Doctor visits increasing. Sophia gasped, a strangled sound of horror escaping her lips. Her eyes fixed on Owen, wide with disbelief and an agony so profound it twisted her features. Owen, she choked out. What is this? What are you talking about? The text messages laid bare a level of cold-blooded calculation that utterly annihilated the last vestiges of her belief in her husband. Eleanor ignored Owen, whose face had gone from ashen to a ghastly green. She flipped to another page. And then there's this, she stated, her voice chillingly calm. An email from Owen to a Chloe, dated about 18 months ago, well after you were married, Sophia. Eleanor cleared her throat and began to read. Subject, progress report, Project Elder Care. Body, Chloe, progress is good on Project Elder. Eleanor is increasingly isolated. I've successfully implemented Strategy 3B, creating subtle but persistent crises that make Sophia distance herself. Last month, I accidentally scheduled Sophia's work trip over Eleanor's birthday, then forgot to tell Sophia until the last minute, forcing a cancellation and guilt. Eleanor now believes Sophia is too busy. Next week, I plan to misplace Eleanor's medical appointment reminders, leading to a missed appointment and further eroding her confidence in Sophia's trust in her memory. Sophia whimpered a small heartbroken sound. Her eyes were glazed over with tears, not of anger, but of utter devastation. The missed birthday, the forgotten appointments, the myriad small slights that she had dismissed as genuine accidents or her own busy schedule, they were all part of a meticulously orchestrated plan. She had been manipulated, not just by Owen, but through him, to hurt her own mother. Who is Chloe? Sophia whispered, her voice barely audible, as if the very name might contain a new horror. Eleanor looked up from the documents, her gaze fixed on Sophia, filled with a sorrowful understanding. Chloe Martinez, she explained, the name itself seeming to carry a sinister weight. She's a business consultant. Her specialty? Wealth acquisition through strategic relationship management. In layman's terms, Sophia, she coaches people on how to marry into money, how to identify wealthy targets, and how to systematically isolate and undermine their family members to gain control of their assets. She paused, letting the full horror of the revelation sink in. Owen didn't just stumble upon our wealth, he targeted it, and he hired a professional to teach him how to take it. If you're still with me, you won't believe what happens next. The truth about betrayal runs deeper than any of us could have imagined. Make sure to hit that like button, share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so you don't miss a single part of this unfolding drama. Eleanor, with the thick folder of incriminating documents resting on the polished table, continued to systematically dismantle Owen's carefully constructed facade. And as for your financial stability, Owen, she stated, her voice cutting through the heavy silence, let's be even more specific. The digital forensics expert also uncovered records showing you have approximately $47,000 in revolving credit card debt, spread across half a dozen cards, all nearing their maximum limits. Furthermore, your successful advertising firm isn't just operating at a loss. It carries over $123,000 in outstanding business loans from various small lenders. And that's not even counting the notice of foreclosure filed against your previous apartment in West Hollywood before you moved into the Beverly Hills home. Sophia turned slowly to Owen, her face a pale mask of horror and disbelief. Her voice was barely a whisper, laced with profound betrayal. Owen, you told me. You swore to me you were financially stable when we met. You said your firm was thriving, that you had a strong investment portfolio. You lied to me, to my face. The realization that her entire marriage was built on a foundation of deceit, not just for financial gain, but involving a deliberate misrepresentation of his character, was crushing her. Eleanor didn't give Owen a chance to respond. She reached into the folder again, pulling out a single glossy photograph. It showed Owen, unmistakable with his confident smile, seated opposite a woman with sharp features and a tight, almost bitter expression. They were in a dimly lit restaurant. "This photograph," Eleanor announced, holding it up for both Sophia and Owen to see, "was taken approximately 8 months before you supposedly chanced upon Sophia at that charity gala, Owen. This is a picture of you meeting with Beatrice Richardson." The name hung in the air, a gasp escaping Sophia's lips. Owen visibly flinched, his eyes widening in pure terror. Beatrice Richardson. The name invoked a ghost from their past, a painful memory. "Beatrice," Eleanor explained, turning her gaze pointedly to Sophia, "is Arthur's estranged sister. My sister-in-law. She's been bitter and resentful for nearly 15 years, ever since a very messy business dispute with Arthur over a parcel of land that she believed was rightfully hers. Arthur won, fairly and squarely, but Beatrice never forgave him. She harbored a deep-seated grudge, a desire for revenge against Arthur, and by extension, our family." Eleanor then connected the devastating dots. "Beatrice introduced Owen to our family. She didn't just introduce him, she groomed him. She found him when he was already desperate, buried in debt. She saw an opportunity for her revenge, using him as a weapon against her own brother. Beatrice provided Owen with highly detailed, intimate information about our family's dynamics, our finances, and most chillingly, Sophia's personal preferences, her dreams, her vulnerabilities. All designed to make Owen seem like the perfect, ideal match for you, Sophia." She slid a few more documents across the table. "And here are the bank records, Owen, showing regular, substantial payments from Beatrice Richardson to your personal accounts. These payments, interestingly enough, stopped abruptly, immediately after your marriage to Sophia was finalized. Her payment for services rendered, I presume." Owen, now drenched in sweat, his eyes darting wildly, still attempted to grasp at straws, his voice hoarse with desperation. "This is all circumstantial. It doesn't change the fact that you're old, Eleanor. You need help managing everything. It's for your own good." He was clinging to the original narrative even as it crumbled around him. Eleanor merely shook her head, a look of profound disappointment on her face. Then, with an almost theatrical flourish, she reached into the envelope one last time, pulling out a document that looked different from all the rest. It was larger, bound in a navy blue cover, clearly an official legal document. "This, Owen," she said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful tone that commanded absolute attention, "is the most important document of all. It's a second alternate will. Arthur filed it with his attorney 1 month before his death." She opened the document, revealing pages of legal text, and began to read from a specific section, her voice clear and precise. "In the event that my wife, Eleanor Patterson, is subjected to elder abuse, financial manipulation, emotional coercion, or any attempt by any family member to forcibly remove her from her home or control her assets against her will, this alternate will shall take immediate effect, nullifying all previous testamentary dispositions." Eleanor looked up, her gaze piercing. "This means, Owen, Sophia, that if you attempt to force me into Sunset Manor, if you try to take this house, the beach house, or the company from me, the first will, the one you think you know, becomes null and void." Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a triumphant edge. "Under this alternate will, I retain full and absolute ownership of all assets, not just for my lifetime, but with full testamentary powers to dispose of them as I see fit, without any challenge or interference from anyone. Effectively, I keep everything and gain ironclad protections that prevent any future challenges to my ownership from either of you." Owen let out a choked cry, his face contorting. "That's not legally possible. Arthur couldn't just override his original will like that. It's insane." "Oh, but it is, Owen," Eleanor countered calmly, a flicker of satisfaction in her eyes. "Arthur worked with not one but 3 of the top estate attorneys in the state of California for months to make this absolutely ironclad. He foresaw every possible legal challenge, every loophole you might try to exploit. They included a bad faith clause specifically for situations like this." She tapped the document with a manicured finger. "It states that anyone who contests this alternate will or who is found to have engaged in manipulation, coercion, or elder abuse against me automatically forfeits any and all inheritance they might have received under any previous will. They are disinherited entirely. Sophia, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally looked up, her face utterly devastated. My inheritance, she whispered, the words barely audible. Eleanor nodded, her gaze full of a profound sadness for her daughter's self-inflicted wound. Under Arthur's original will, Sophia, you were set to inherit the Malibu beach house and 40% of the company outright. A significant inheritance, a legacy meant for you. Eleanor paused, letting the weight of her next words settle. But if you go through with your plan to force me out, to send me to that nursing home, if you continue with this attempt at manipulation, you will lose everything. Every single cent. The beach house, the 40% of the company, anything you might have received. All gone. The revelation was a crushing blow and almost physical impact on Sophia. Her eyes, filled with tears, met Eleanor's, and the depth of her regret, her despair, was palpable. And finally, Eleanor said, pulling out one last document, a crisp, official-looking paper. This is Chloe Martinez's sworn affidavit, a full, detailed account, under penalty of perjury, of her entire strategy, her coaching notes to Owen, the breakdown of the psychological methods to isolate me from you, Sophia, the specific instructions on how to discredit my memory, how to portray me as frail and incapable, all designed to pave the way for Owen to seize control of our family's assets, and for you to be complicit in the process. The affidavit, solid and undeniable, lay on the table. It was the ultimate final betrayal, not just of Eleanor, but of Sophia's own heart, her own relationship with her mother. The man she loved, the sister of her father, and a hired consultant had conspired to systematically destroy her family, and in doing so had destroyed Sophia's future as well. The dining room, once a sanctuary of family gatherings, now felt like a courtroom where a damning verdict had just been delivered. Owen, his face a grotesque mask of sweat and panic, began to slowly back away from the table, his eyes fixed on the door, a desperate attempt to escape the crushing weight of the evidence. He moved with the jerky, unnatural motions of a trapped animal. His previous bravado entirely evaporated. "Where do you think you're going, Owen?" Eleanor's voice, sharp and cold, cut through the silence, stopping him dead in his tracks. "We haven't gotten to the best part yet, not by a long shot." She watched him, a grim satisfaction warring with the deep sadness in her heart. He was exposed, his web of lies unraveling thread by thread. Owen, desperate, tried one last frantic attempt to regain control, to manipulate Sophia. He turned to her, his voice a hoarse whisper, reaching out a trembling hand. "Sophia, honey, don't listen to her. Your mother is old." Arthur was a paranoid old man, obsessed with control. He made up these stories, these twisted fantasies. He was trying to turn you against me. Can't you see that? But Sophia didn't see it to us. She was staring at the pile of documents on the table, the weight of the undeniable truth pressing down on her. Her hand, which Owen had tried to touch, instinctively recoiled. A shudder ran through her, a tremor of disgust and dawning comprehension. "Stop," she whispered, her voice shaking, but surprisingly firm. The single word, imbued with a quiet but fierce authority, was enough. Owen froze, his hand still suspended in the air, his eyes wide with a new kind of fear, the fear of losing Sophia, not just her inheritance. Eleanor watched Sophia closely, seeing the myriad emotions warring on her daughter's face, the initial confusion, the profound hurt, the dawning, sickening realization of how thoroughly she had been manipulated, not just by Owen, but by Arthur's own estranged sister, Beatrice, who had orchestrated this entire cruel deception. It was a painful education, but one Sophia desperately needed. Sophia finally lifted her gaze to Owen, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, but also a newfound steel. Her voice was still fragile, but held a cutting edge. "How long, Owen? How long have you been planning this?" As she spoke, Owen attempted to reach for her hand again, a pathetic, desperate gesture. Sophia flinched back, pulling her hand away as if burned. The physical rejection was clear and unequivocal. Eleanor answered for him, picking up another document from the folder. According to Chloe Martinez's affidavit, Owen, in corroborating evidence from the private investigator, Owen began actively researching our family, our wealth, our connections, our vulnerabilities, 14 months before your supposed chance meeting at that coffee shop, Sophia. Eleanor looked at her daughter, her heart aching for her. He knew your favorite coffee. He knew your work schedule. He knew your interests, your dreams, even your deepest insecurities. He didn't just meet you, Sophia. He targeted you. He curated an image designed to perfectly match your preferences based on information Beatrice provided to make you fall in love with him. Sophia's face crumpled. The romantic fairy tale she had so cherished, the spontaneous connection she believed she shared with Owen, was a cruel manufactured lie. Eleanor then pushed another printed email across the table to Sophia. Here, Sophia, this is an email from Owen to Chloe. He's discussing you and how he's progressing with the Project Isolation strategy. Eleanor watched as Sophia's eyes scanned the text. Subject, Sophia progress. Body, Chloe, Sophia is proving remarkably easy to isolate. Her classic only child dependency issues, combined with Eleanor's protective nature, create perfect conditions. I'm systematically positioning myself as her sole confidant, her escape from her overbearing parents. The emotional manipulation is almost effortless. Sophia choked back a sigh. The words on the page, a brutal indictment. Her supposed dependency issues, her mother's protective nature, were being twisted, weaponized against her, used as tools to dismantle her family bonds. Owen, witnessing Sophia's devastation, finally saw his charming facade completely crack. Sophia, no, honey, that's taken out of context. Owen stammered, his voice laced with a desperate plea. I was trying to help you, Sophia, to help you grow as an independent person, away from your parents' constant oversight. They were always so controlling, you know that. He tried to project an air of concern, but it was too late. The mask was gone. Sophia's voice, however, was growing stronger, fueled by a simmering anger that was finally eclipsing her hurt. By lying to me, Owen. By intercepting calls from my mother, by fabricating scheduling conflicts so I couldn't see them, by making me believe they were too busy for me, when it was you who was manipulating my calendar? Her chest heaved with the force of her revelations. Eleanor then pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook, its pages filled with Arthur's meticulous handwriting. Arthur kept this, Sophia, a log. Every single canceled visit, every fabricated reason Owen gave you for why you couldn't see us. The food poisoning that struck him so often right before a family dinner. The car breakdown that always occurred precisely when we planned a weekend getaway. The mother in hospital excuse, which was used on at least 3 separate occasions. Sophia's eyes widened further. His mother in Phoenix, she whispered, her voice tinged with a new, dawning horror. He told me his mother was always in Phoenix, in a nursing facility. Eleanor nodded grimly. Arthur knew that. He confirmed it. And he knew that you would have no reason to doubt Owen's excuses. But he was suspicious. So he made a few discreet phone calls. To Phoenix General, for instance. And as he noted here, Eleanor pointed to a specific entry in the notebook. Owen's mother was never admitted to any of the hospitals in Phoenix. Nor was she in any assisted living facility there. She passed away 10 years ago, Sophia. Owen's entire story about his ailing mother was a complete fabrication, designed to elicit your sympathy and explain away his sudden disappearances or lack of family involvement. Owen finally collapsed into his chair, defeat etched onto every line of his face. His shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the tablecloth. Okay, he choked out, holding up his hands in a gesture of surrender. Maybe I wasn't completely honest about everything. Maybe I stretched the truth a bit, but that doesn't mean I don't love you, Sophia. I do. He looked up, his eyes pleading. Sophia stared at him, her gaze cold and empty. No, Owen, she said flatly, her voice hollow. You don't love me. You love the idea of a future built on my parents' money. Owen's last shred of pretense finally broke. He looked at Eleanor, then at Sophia, a raw desperation in his eyes. What's wrong with wanting financial security? He almost snarled, his voice a mix of anger and self-pity. I just wanted a good life for us, a secure life. Eleanor, her expression unreadable, reached for one final document. It was a single sheet of paper embossed with an official seal. Speaking of security, Owen, she said, her voice now filled with an icy finality. Arthur also prepared for your desperate reactions. She held up the document. This is a temporary restraining order, signed by Judge Harding and filed by Arthur, to be activated immediately should you threaten, harass, or attempt to coerce me or any other family member, or attempt to re-enter this property without my explicit invitation. Just as the words left her lips, Eleanor's phone, resting on the table beside her, vibrated. She picked it up, glanced at the caller ID, and a faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. She answered, her voice calm and clear. Deputy Davies, yes, everything is proceeding exactly as planned. We just had a small family discussion. No need to come inside. You can confirm that Owen has been made fully aware of the restraining order. And yes, he will be leaving the premises immediately. She hung up the phone, her gaze sweeping over Owen, whose face was now a mask of utter despair. The iron cage had closed. Eleanor, her face a mask of determined resolve, pressed the speakerphone button on her cell. Deputy Davies' voice, slightly tinny, filled the dining room. Deputy Davies, thank you for calling. Yes, I'm quite safe for the moment. The situation is being handled. However, I may need to activate that restraining order very soon, so perhaps just stay in the vicinity for a little while longer. She emphasized the word activate, ensuring Owen understood the immediate threat. Owen's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of white. His eyes, darting from Eleanor to Sophia, then to the phone, were wide with the dawning realization that Arthur had indeed thought of everything. Every escape route, every loophole, every desperate move Owen might make had been anticipated and countered. Sophia, her gaze now fixed on Owen, her voice trembling but firm, delivered the final crushing blow to any lingering hope he might have harbored. You married me for money, she stated. Not as a question, but as a stark, undeniable fact. Our entire relationship, everything we built, every promise, every shared dream, it was just a con game, wasn't it? A carefully orchestrated fraud. The weight of the truth settled on her, heavy and cold. Owen, desperate, tried one last pathetic plea. He stumbled to his feet, reaching towards Sophia with outstretched hands. No, Sophia, please. My feelings for you, they were real. They are real. We can work through this, honey. We can fix this. I made mistakes, yes, but we can start fresh. Please, just give me a chance to explain. His voice was raw with desperation, but it no longer held any power over Sophia. Sophia recoiled, her face etched with incredulity. Explain what, Owen? That you've been systematically isolating me from my own mother for 3 years? That you planned, with a paid consultant and my father's estranged sister, to steal her house, her business, her entire life savings? That you manipulated my feelings, my vulnerabilities, to achieve your own selfish ends? Her voice rose, thick with the righteous anger that had finally broken through her hurt. There's nothing to explain, there's only betrayal. At that moment, Eleanor reached across the table, her hand covering Sophia's trembling one. It was the first physical touch they had shared in months that wasn't a forced formality. A spark of connection, of shared pain and burgeoning understanding, passed between them. Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, not for herself, but for her daughter, for the pain she was enduring, and for the possibility of mending their fractured relationship. Sophia, Eleanor said gently, her voice thick with emotion, Arthur also left something for you specifically. She pushed a smaller, sealed envelope across the table, one that had been hidden beneath the others. He wrote this for you, knowing this day might come. Sophia tore open the envelope, her fingers trembling, and pulled out a single sheet of paper, also in Arthur's familiar hand. As she read, tears streamed down her face, but they were different now. Tears of grief for her father, tears of regret for her own blindness, but also tears of profound, unconditional love. Arthur's letter reassured her, in his loving, unwavering voice, that he never blamed her for being manipulated. He understood Owen's cunning, his ability to exploit vulnerabilities, and expressed his steadfast belief in Sophia's inherent goodness and strength. He urged her to find that strength again, to reclaim her life, and to never let anyone extinguish her light. Owen, witnessing this intimate moment, this tangible evidence of a bond he had tried so hard to sever, made one last desperate attempt to regain control. His voice was a harsh plea tinged with a thinly veiled threat. "Sophia, we're married now. You can't just throw away our marriage because of some old man's paranoia and some fabricated documents. Think of our future." Sophia slowly lifted her gaze from Arthur's letter. Her eyes, though still wet with tears, now held a newfound strength, a blazing determination that Eleanor recognized as her own spirit finally reawakening. Her voice, no longer trembling, was clear and decisive. "Get out, Owen," she commanded, her tone chillingly calm. "Get out of this house. Get out of my life. If you are not gone in the next 5 minutes, I will personally call Deputy Davies back and have you removed. Do not test me." Owen's facade completely crumbled. The mask of charm and desperation fell away, revealing an ugly, desperate individual beneath. His eyes narrowed, filled with a malicious spite. "You'll have nothing, Sophia," he snarled, pointing a trembling finger at Eleanor. "When she's gone, you'll be alone, and you'll have nothing." Eleanor slowly rose from her chair, her back straight, her gaze unwavering as she met Owen's hateful glare. Her voice, though quiet, was filled with a formidable power. "She'll have everything, Owen," Eleanor countered, her voice ringing with conviction. "Because unlike you, Sophia and I understand that family isn't something you throw away. It's something you protect. And she'll have me. She'll have our home, our legacy, and a future free from your poisonous influence." Owen, defeated and exposed, finally stumbled out of the dining room and, a few moments later, Eleanor heard the front door slam shut. The heavy silence that followed was one of immense relief, mixed with the lingering echoes of pain. Over the next 3 days, Owen launched a relentless campaign of desperate phone calls and voicemails, alternating between pleading, threatening, and gaslighting. He even showed up at the house twice, banging on the door demanding to speak to Sophia. But Eleanor, fortified by Arthur's foresight and her own renewed resolve, held firm. She ignored his calls and the restraining order, activated after his second unwelcome visit, ensured he kept his distance. It wasn't enough, though. Owen's threats, his desperate claims, only solidified Eleanor's resolve to see Arthur's final plan through to its bitter end. She called Attorney Maxwell, Arthur's longtime legal counsel. The next morning, a courier arrived with a thick stack of documents. These were not just civil matters. These were documents detailing Owen's impending felony charges: financial fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. Arthur, in his thoroughness, had already initiated the criminal investigation. And then Eleanor retrieved one final item from Arthur's hidden collection: a small digital voice recorder. She pressed play, and Arthur's study, where the dining room now stood, was filled with Owen's smug voice, captured in a series of phone calls with Beatrice, recorded by Arthur himself. Owen, unaware of the device, openly bragged about how easy it would be to declare Eleanor incompetent after Arthur's death, how easily he could manipulate Sophia, and how soon he would have his hands on their entire fortune. The casual cruelty of his voice sent shivers down Eleanor's spine, but it also solidified her resolve. Justice for Arthur and for herself would be served. "Arthur, in his meticulous way, anticipated every one of your moves, Owen," Eleanor stated, holding up yet another document. "This is Arthur's challenge clause. If you or anyone acting on your behalf were to contest this new will, it automatically triggers a full financial disclosure of all your assets, debts, and sources of income. Not just for a civil case, but for a public record. It also mandates a comprehensive psychological evaluation to determine your capacity for manipulation and deceit." She paused, letting the words sink in. "And the moment you contest, it triggers an immediate countersuit for emotional distress, fraud, and elder abuse with punitive damages that would leave you financially ruined, even if you weren't already." The doorbell rang again, a frantic, insistent peal that echoed through the quiet house. Owen, apparently unable to accept his defeat, was back. Eleanor, with a calm she hadn't felt in years, walked to the front door. She opened it just enough for the heavy security chain to remain engaged, revealing Owen's enraged, desperate face through the narrow gap. "Eleanor, let me in. You can't do this," he bellowed, his voice raw. Eleanor merely held up the stack of legal documents she had retrieved from Attorney Maxwell. "Owen," she said, her voice clear and steady, devoid of any emotion. "These are documents pertaining to federal charges: financial fraud, identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse." She watched his face drain of all color. "Chloe Martinez, your consultant, has already cooperated with federal investigators. Her business has been shut down, and she's facing 15 to 20 years in federal prison." Eleanor paused, then delivered the final blow. "And Beatrice? Arthur's sister? She's also under investigation for conspiracy and aiding and abetting. Her revenge, Owen, will cost her everything, just as yours will cost you." Owen's shoulders slumped. The last vestiges of his defiance, his bluster, his desperate attempts to cling to his crumbling facade, evaporated. He looked utterly defeated, a broken man. Eleanor then pushed one final document through the crack in the door. "This," she stated, "is a divorce settlement agreement, drawn up by Arthur's attorneys. It states that in exchange for a full and complete cessation of all criminal proceedings against you and your cooperation, you will receive absolutely nothing. No alimony, no share of any property, just your considerable personal and business debts. It's your only way out of federal prison, Owen, and you have 24 hours to sign it." Sophia, standing behind Eleanor, her eyes fixed on Owen, found her voice, now infused with a steel that Eleanor recognized from Arthur himself. "We didn't build anything together, Owen," she asserted, her voice strong and clear. "You built lies, and you built them on my family's pain." Owen stared at the document, then at Sophia, his eyes filled with a desperate, wounded anger. "This isn't over," he snarled, his voice a low growl of pure malice. He turned and stumbled away from the door, his proud gait replaced by a defeated shuffle. Eleanor watched him go, then closed the door, clicking the lock into place. "Oh, yes, it is, Owen," she murmured to the closed door, her voice soft but resolute. "Arthur made sure of that." 6 months later, a profound sense of peace had settled over Eleanor and Sophia, much like the gentle rhythm of the waves lapping against the shore of the Malibu beach house. Owen, true to his self-preservation instincts, had signed the divorce settlement. His credit was destroyed, his advertising business was bankrupt, and the federal charges, while dropped, had permanently blacklisted him from any legitimate business. He was last heard of living with his mother, not in Phoenix, but in a small apartment in Bakersfield, a place where his once grand ambitions had withered into ignominy. Beatrice, facing the weight of evidence, had lost her business, her home, and was navigating a complex legal battle that promised to strip her of everything. Sophia's healing journey had been long and arduous, but she approached it with the same quiet determination her father had possessed. She attended therapy, gradually unraveling the complex web of manipulation Owen had woven around her, realizing how systematically he had sought to demolish her self-sense, her confidence, and her connection to her mother. In a moment of clarity, while going through some old boxes, she rediscovered a hidden stash of letters from Eleanor, written to her over the years, filled with pride and unconditional love. Letters Owen had intercepted or caused her to overlook. It was a powerful validation of her mother's enduring affection and her father's wisdom. The family business, under the joint management of Eleanor and Sophia, thrived. They discovered they were an excellent team, Eleanor's decades of experience complementing Sophia's fresh perspective and keen business acumen. The company grew, expanding into new markets, a testament to their combined strength and vision. Sophia, now free from Owen's poisonous influence, blossomed. She reconnected with old friends, picking up her beloved photography hobby with renewed passion. She even began dating again, cautiously at first, then with increasing confidence. Michael, a kind, genuine man she met through a mutual friend, encouraged her independence, admired her strength, and never once questioned her past. He was the antithesis of Owen, a true partner who valued her for who she was, not for what she possessed. One sunny afternoon at a cheerful cooking class they had decided to take together, a small, final envelope slipped from a cookbook Eleanor was holding. It was another letter from Arthur. She opened it, her eyes misting over as she read his familiar script aloud, her voice filled with love. "My dearest girls," Arthur had written, his words a final balm to their souls. "Always remember the love between a mother and a daughter is unbreakable. It can bend, it can be tested, but it never truly breaks." The letter continued, praising Eleanor's unwavering strength and Sophia's inherent compassion. It reminded them not to let the cruelty they had endured make them cynical, but rather to use their experience to help others. "And so," Eleanor read, her voice cracking slightly, "I leave you one final gift, a foundation, $500,000 to be co-managed by you both, dedicated to helping other families dealing with financial elder abuse. Let it be a beacon of hope, a testament to what we stand for." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery glow across the Pacific, Eleanor and Sophia sat on the deck of the Malibu beach house, a comfortable silence between them. The gentle sounds of the ocean, the cries of seagulls, were a soothing symphony of peace. Eleanor turned to Sophia, a soft smile on her lips. "You know," she said, "even if Arthur hadn't left me this incredible arsenal, I think you would have eventually seen through Owen, Sophia. You're too smart, too kind, too much like your father." Sophia leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, a gesture of comfort and connection that had been absent for too long. "Maybe," she murmured, "but I'm so glad he did. He saved us, Mom. He saved me." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling the warmth of their renewed bond. "He did," she agreed, looking out at the endless expanse of the ocean. "He'd be proud of us. He'd say his girls figured out how to take care of themselves just fine." And the scent of the ocean breeze, fresh and clean, filled the air, carrying with it the undeniable presence of Arthur, their steadfast protector, whose love had ultimately triumphed over greed and betrayal.